I'm a Bosnian genocide survivor, and here are 15 survival lessons of Bosnian genocide. So, lesson number 1, be really well armed and well organized. At the beginning of the Bosnian War, there was a weapons embargo that was imposed upon the region by United States and the West, and that arms embargo disproportionately hurt the Muslim population because they had no weapons. The army of Yugoslavia was controlled by Serbia, and they were the fourth largest army, in fact, in Europe. And all those weapons were then handed off to Serb paramilitaries, also to the army of Republika Srpska. So in other words, they were incredibly well armed. So Bosnians were down to having to often find hunting rifles to defend themselves. They had to improvise stuff like cut sewer pipes and color them green. So when people run with them, the opposition thinks those are like bazookas. I mean, literally, it was like fake it till you make it kind of a situation, especially in 1992 Bosnia. And that is a big lesson of having guns and having been organized ahead of time. Number 2, don't ever give up the weapons to somebody who's promising to make you safe. So the citizens of Srebrenica gave up all their weapons in hopes that UN would protect them. In Goražde, which was the other safe area, citizens and army refused to give up their weapons. And as you know, Srebrenica fell, and over 8,000 men and boys were murdered because United Nations not only did not protect them, in many ways they were complicit. They helped Serbs separate men from women. They pushed all the people they were protecting inside of the UN base out. So in other words, don't trust anybody, and I mean anybody, that comes and says, give me your weapons and I'll protect you. They're not going to protect you. The only one who can protect you is you. Number 3, this was a common story for many that were imprisoned, tortured, beaten, and so on. And then one day somebody shows up and says, we're taking you for a prisoner exchange. No. In pretty much every single case, they put these men, women, children, whoever was imprisoned on trucks or buses. They took them to a mass grave and they executed them. Number 4, so in Bosnia, several genocides had already happened. Bosnian Muslims had a genocide against them in 1941, but there is an example of a genocide going all the way back to 1873 in Kulan Vakuf, which is in northwest Bosnia. And after all those examples of genocide, Bosnian Muslims practiced, let's just say, culture of amnesia, in which they wanted to kind of put it all behind them and to say this is never going to happen again. And, you know, people killed us back then, but they're not going to do that now. The problem is the reasons and excuses they use for perpetrating that genocide haven't gone away. They're still around. They were around in 1873 and they're around now in 2025, which means nothing really fundamentally has changed. So don't assume anybody has changed unless they've truly proven that, meaning have they gone through a reconciliation process? Have they taken measurable steps to show that they've changed individually and culturally for you to even begin to consider that they're actually serious, that this is never going to happen again? Number 5, it only takes about 2 to 3% of the population to physically commit a genocide. However, you needed as many as 40 to 50% of the civilian population to either be complicit, meaning to aid and abet this genocide, to help along this genocide, which there are many examples. And number 2, you needed a large percentage of the civilian population that's indifferent to people dying, meaning they wouldn't really commit it. They might even say, oh, I don't like it, I don't think we should do this, but they're still going to let it happen and then kind of look the other way. So it's really important to remember that this is much larger than just the perpetrators. There needed to be a culture in which this could happen. Number 6, many examples of family members killing other family members, or for example, godfathers killing their godchildren that were of the other religion, right? So the godfather was, say, Serbian, and they were killing their Muslim godchildren and families to whom they were godfathers. Everybody's like, how is this possible? How did they go from being somebody's family and friends to suddenly killing them? Once you understand that these guys were living by the keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer philosophy, they'd considered all the people to whom they were family to really be enemies, and they kept really close all the years, pretended to be their friends, and then when they had an opportunity to commit genocide, they did. And don't assume because somebody's close to your family that appears to be your family, that they really are your family. Assumption is, as they say, the mother of all fuck-ups. So don't assume. Number 7. So speaking of assumptions, don't assume that villages will be safer than cities. Most of the genocide, most of the killing, most of the rapes and everything else happened outside of urban environments. They were a product of villages being run over, being defenseless, and then horrible war crimes being committed. Number 8. If you're on the run, cemeteries are a good place to hide. It just so happens that nobody expects the living there. And number 9, in all the wars, including the Bosnian genocide, there's always some amount of people that are chosen for forced labor. So if you're chosen as a trench digger, don't assume that your life is safe, that everything's going to be fine. In pretty much all the cases, the trench diggers were eventually all shot and killed. So therefore, don't assume you'll be safe as a trench digger. Instead, look for any opportunity to run. Just assume you're dead. Look for the opportunity to run. Number 10, this was really important, to be food, water, and power self-sufficient. So most of the Bosnians ended up being not self-sufficient with food, especially ones in Sarajevo, where I was during the siege of Sarajevo. So the Serb army surrounded Sarajevo, and the resulting siege was 1,500 days long, the longest siege in recorded history. And people in Sarajevo were not food sufficient, therefore we depended on UN and anybody else to bring humanitarian aid. Except the problem is, sometimes the aid wouldn't come, and the other problem is the quality of that aid was horrible. Sometimes we had to eat cans of tuna from 1950s, cookies from 1940s, military rations from 1960s. These came from basically food stockpiles of the West. So they gave us absolutely the worst stuff that none of them would be eating. And we were the guinea pigs of eating that food, and who knows what kind of damage it did to our bodies. Number 11, in Bosnia, when there's a genocide, when something terrible happens, the Bosnian Muslims tend to practice culture of amnesia, not culture of remembrance. So they try to say, let's forgive and forget. No. I think forgiving is a good idea. Like, you don't want to hold all that in. You don't want to hold the hate in. You don't want it to eat you up. But at the same time, you should never, ever forget. Forgetting is a betrayal to those who died. Essentially, they died for nothing. They died in vain. And nobody now remembers their deaths. Nobody now remembers the lessons of their deaths. So therefore, no, you should not forget. And you should also not forget because you need to teach those that are coming that this could happen again. Meaning the children, their children need to be aware this could happen again. So please don't be forgetting. Yes, forgive, don't forget. Number 12, this was very much the case in all these situations where Serb army entered a village. They would often tell everybody in the village, come out, we're not going to shoot you. If you come out, you'll be safe. If you stay in your houses and hide, well, then we'll kill you. So a lot of people chose, of course, to step outside. They were like, okay, we're going to follow what we've been told. And that was a deadly mistake. If you're hiding, stay hiding. Number 13, a person would survive a shooting. They would survive a massacre. They would be taken to an area where there was a mass grave and they survived it for some reason. Some of them ran back to where they were captured, meaning their original villages and so on. That is a deadly mistake. If you were caught there before, you're probably going to be caught there again. So it is not a good idea, even if you're emotionally driven to go to a place of safety and you feel like the place of safety is your old house where your family was and all that. It is not a place of safety. Number 14, this goes back to this idea of people entering a village and village is not well defended or not defended at all. If they come in and say, come out, or only men come out, everybody should run. And there's many examples and cases of those that ran, their lives were saved, and those that stayed, their lives ended. So it's really important not to be compliant. And number 15 is really, really important. Don't live in denial and false hopes, thinking that this isn't going to happen, that people are not absolute monsters. You should assume that they are very much monsters, especially if there is a precedent to them doing horrible crimes as there was in Bosnia. So therefore, if you know danger is coming, if you feel danger is coming deep down, don't talk yourself out of it. Believe it. If people are threatening your life, believe it and run. Get yourself out of the horrible situation before it's too late. And hopefully there's some value in what I just said that could potentially, God forbid, that you find yourself in a situation that we did in Bosnia, could potentially maybe save your life.